In the last episode, we looked at Elizabeth's early life. We're now looking at how Elizabeth ruled. But one correction to the previous one. Elizabeth didn't learn German fluently. It was just French, Italian and Spanish. Well, how did Elizabeth rule? Firstly, she had a royal court, about 500 people. This is a place to be seen, a place to be close to the Queen, and a place where the Queen could display her glory. It was part of the whole propaganda of a monarch. A monarch had to try and show that they were special, show that they were glorious, both to her subjects but also to the international community. A second way that Elizabeth could govern would be through patronage. And in the case of patronage, she would be able to give jobs with incomes to various people and prestige. These jobs would have prestige. And it was one way of controlling people, making sure that they were on side. And it was one of the things that she had at her disposal. Another way she could show herself would be for processions. So in the summer months, she would leave the city, often a wise thing to do because of plagues, and she would go around the countryside and visit various nobles' families and stay at their houses. It was also a way of reducing her own costs because they had to pay for her entertainment and food for her and all the people who followed her. And there used to be a very large train of carriages, as it were, or carts carrying all the goods of the court as it moved around. She didn't do this towards the latter part of her life, and she never really went very far north, but it was certainly a way of getting her known in much of the country and amongst the nobles as well. Another, and probably the most important way in which she governed the country, was through the Privy Council. And in the Privy Council, she would have up to 20 people looking after various government departments. And she was very fortunate in having faithful servants, the most famous of which was William Cecil, who was sort of head of the Privy Council for most of her reign. And then there was Francis Walsingham, who was effectively her chief spy master, very important because of the number of assassination attempts against her. And then she had her great favourite, Robert Dudley, who was often, it has to be said, crossing swords with William Cecil, and the two didn't see eye to eye on policies. Robert Dudley was a potential suitor for the Queen, and obviously someone she had a great regard for. But the idea of a divided Privy Council was something that she actually courted and encouraged. It helped her to come in as the mediator between two warring parties. And I think she played her feminine status quite well in doing that. One other aspect of the Parliament, of the system of government that Elizabeth had, was Parliament. And here I think historians are divided as to how significant Parliament was during Elizabeth's reign. She needed Parliament for money because Parliament had control over taxes and also passing laws. And so in the 14 times that she called Parliament, 12 of them she raised taxes. And therefore I think Parliament grew in its authority during Elizabeth's reign. And it's fair to say that by the time her successor James I came to the throne, Parliament had acquired a level of authority and respect that made it very hard for James to ignore. And of course, within 50 years of Elizabeth's death, we will see that there's going to be a battle between Parliament and Elizabeth. And I think it's worth reading what Elizabeth said at the end of her reign in 1601 to Parliament, because we recognise that Elizabeth wasn't enthusiastic about Parliament, did not appreciate its contributions on her marriage and on other affairs to do with religion. But this is what she said at the end of her reign. Talking to Parliament: I have reigned with your loves. I do not so much rejoice that God hath made me to be queen, as to be a queen over so thankful a people. It is not my desire to live or reign longer than my life and reign shall be for your good. And though you have many mightier and wiser princes sitting in this seat, you have never had, nor ever shall have, any that will love you better than I do. And I think that speech at the end of her reign sums up an important aspect of Elizabeth's approach to running the country. She wanted to run it on the basis that the people loved her and that she loved them. You might say that that was a piece of propaganda, but it is fair to say that she was a popular queen for much of her reign, though the last 10 years it was less popular. And she did command a great deal of respect. Well, what about God's perspective on the reign of Elizabeth? I think I would say two things. Firstly, it's remarkable that Elizabeth ever got to be queen. She was in very great danger during Mary's reign, and at one point was very close to being executed. And so I think God is the Lord of history, and he often makes sure that the person he wants is in the place where he wants them to be, even though there are extreme circumstances against that. So, assuming that Elizabeth was the right person for the right time, what was it that she accomplished that maybe God wanted to have accomplished at this point in history? Well, the most important thing for anyone is the Word of God, is the Bible. It is God's revelation to us. And Elizabeth made sure that as a nation, we were a nation that had a Bible, and a Bible that was widely read, and a Bible that was in the language of the people. And that was something that we could take all around the world over the next 400 years. And if the Bible is indeed the most precious thing that humans have, then that's a really important thing that Elizabeth achieved. And I think we can give her credit for that. I think the other thing is that she created a stability for 45 years that allowed Parliament and the creative side of the nation to flower and prosper. Something that will be exported around the world. You know, William Shakespeare, think about it, and the parliamentary democracies that we have. And we'll look at some of these things later. But I think she was God's person at God's time. And for that, we're very grateful that she was around. Thank you for listening.